Brett King. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Anu.
What are the key skills that people should develop to stay relevant in this new era of augmented age?
So a superpower is adaptability. I encourage everyone to use AI in your life as much as you can. There are two types of people in the world today. The first type is using AI to enhance their career, and the second type of person is the person those that will be replaced by the first type.
Like, my government is not going to come and support me for this. What happens to me?
Here's the problem. If you want to keep capitalism, you can't have AI. You can't have both.
Some of these concepts that you speak are very dystopian. It scares me. It's like as if the future is doomed.
Yeah. Only if we have capitalism.
Only if we have that. There's AI, which is large-scale automation. Then there is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. What stage are we at?
Different types of AI applications of industrial artificial intelligence, in use in facial recognition for customs and border patrol. Then you have generative AI, agentic AI, which people are going to hear a lot more about this year.
What are the basic trends in banking? Where do you see disruption because of AI, AGI, and ASI?
In 10 years' time, all of the fastest growing banks in the world will be AI.
Hello and welcome to the Talk Lane. Today we are not just talking about the future, we are talking to the man who has been predicting future for over a decade. His name is Brett King. Brett is a world-renowned futurist, best-selling author, and a fintech disruptor who revolutionized digital banking with his startup Movin, the groundbreaking mobile banking startup that redefined financial services. Movin became a major player in the fintech space before licensing its technology to the banks globally. Brett's insight have shaped industries and influenced policymakers. His book Augmented was recommended by Chinese President Xi Jinping as an essential reading on artificial intelligence. His book, Bank 4.0, won the title of Top Book by a Foreign Author in Russia, and he was inducted in the FinTech Hall of Fame in 2020. He's advised governments, Fortune 500 companies, and tech giants on the future of AI, automation, and digital economies. He doesn't just write about the future, he defines it. And with him today, we are going deep in AI, AGI, the evolution of banking, and what the next decade holds for all of us. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Anu.
So, Brett, I'm going to start with, just learning more about your career and your journey professionally. You've had an incredible career as an entrepreneur, author, and futurist. What inspired your journey in the fintech space and the future of banking?
I started life as a programmer, actually. So, it goes way back there. I was working on systems that integrated with banks and stuff many, many years ago. And essentially, in the process of sort of the shift to the internet, I was very early on. I had an internet service provider business in Melbourne, Australia, when I was younger. And when the e-business boom sort of happened, at the time I was at Deloitte working as a senior manager, and they promoted me and moved me to Hong Kong to run the e-business practice for the Asia business. But at the time in Hong Kong, the practice was fairly weak for financial services, and you had to, in terms of technology stuff, and you had to have back in those days, an industry competency. So I lined myself up with financial services. I'd had a fair bit of technical experience in that domain, and started working on very early sort of .com related stuff. So in the noughties, in the 2000s, working with HSBC extensively on their digital strategy, Standard Chartered, Amex, Citi. I launched the first online Citibank credit card. In fact, the first online credit card in Asia.
Wow.
And then, of course, I could see from within banking the really functional issues around technology adaptation and technology agility just weren't there. And I tried to push that forward myself from within the sector and got a lot of resistance. So I worked out there was value in being able to anticipate sort of technological change And I worked out there was a lot of technology guys like me, guys and girls like me, who were really struggling to get their leadership to listen to what was
Yeah.
happening. And so
Yeah.
I decided to be the voice of that disenfranchised group of techies back in those days. And of course, since then, the importance of technology in banking has amplified 100-fold. So it was a good move. And that I published my first book, Bank 2.0, in 2010. That became a global bestseller for the banking sector. That's led to a whole series of books and a career speaking and advising on digital strategy for the banking sector, including, 24 central banks around the world, incidentally.
Amazing. One thing that I took away from this stuff that you said, you launched Asia's first credit card with Citibank, and this was in early 2000s. There was no concept of credit card.
2001. It was an
2001.
online, it was called the Citi e-card, so yeah. And it was it was sort of really had to patch things together to be able to apply for a credit card online. That was very revolutionary back then. Of course, now it's done commonly, but back in those days it was tough. When we started moving, you mentioned it in the intro. I registered the domain for moving in 2010, and that sort of was the start of the journey. And it was back in those days, we called it Move and Bank, right? And we had to contract that to Movin because the central bank didn't like us having the name bank because we didn't have a charter. We were sitting on top of a BaaS platform. But it was back in those days when we launched, everything we did was a first, Like we were the first debit card you could sign up for in an app. We were the first to provide real-time categorization and real-time receipts for card transactions and wallet transactions. We were the first online IDV process. We had the first app in the banking space which didn't use a list of your accounts on the homepage, but actually had an artifact that taught you about how you're using your money. Like I could go on, but that's the beauty of being in tech. You're always on that sort of bleeding edge, experimenting.
But so this is very interesting when you're talking about 2001 launching first credit card in Asia. There was no concept of credit card. That's also a consumer market which is extremely, extremely conservative. They don't believe in the concept of credit or credit card. Talk to me about the consumer mindset at that point in time. And, this is a leapfrog of faith, like from not even having bank accounts in many of these markets to actually moving to credit cards. So can you talk to me about what was the landscape then? What prompted this idea and what was the outcome?
Well, no, I mean, I wasn't, I was at the time in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong and Singapore, there were credit cards, but the most common way of banks selling you a credit card was to offer you a free toaster. Right, or a free TV or something.
Okay.
Right, that was the game, And so coming along and doing online application was pretty leading edge, and it was too successful in the early stages. We couldn't keep up with the volume because it wasn't an automated system. We actually, essentially had the online form go into a spreadsheet, and then there was a guy who had to fill out application forms electronically, right? So internally, it was pretty crazy. But we did the first RSA token for accessing internet. I think in 2004. We did the first online travel insurance, or first online insurance product in Asia, which was for HSBC. It was travel insurance, and that was incredibly successful. I think at the time it was something like, on average, about 300 travel insurance applications were received every month through the branches for HSBC in Hong Kong. And we implemented this, and within 6 months, we were getting 1,500 applications online each month. So, it was a very strong product. But we did a lot of really experimental things back in those days. They were fun days. I remember doing the first ever usability study at a bank in Asia, when I was in Hong Kong, which was, and it was very instructive. We found out, we did these, it wasn't like it was experimental. So it was sort of like a quantitative test
Mm.
framed as a qualitative usability study, but we had 20 people in a room all using computers with cameras watching what they're doing. It was pretty
Oh, wow.
interesting.
Very
Really
well.
early,
Very
early
good. Yeah.
stages.
Yeah.
And in the post you know test workshop, there was one task we gave people, which was to change their email address or change their physical address with the bank. And it was like 90% of people couldn't get that task done.
Mm.
And there was a tab within internet banking, and it was called services. And
Mm.
that was where the change address function was. And
Mm.
so, but nobody was clicking on that. So we asked, well, why didn't you click on this menu? And they said, oh, no, that's services. That's what the bank wants to sell me stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was just, so we changed that tab to my HSBC instead
Hmm.
of services. And the next week, call center volume went down 15%.
Oh, wow.
Just
Oh,
that little change in language. So that was, I remember those days. It was really interesting experimental stuff, but we were making really strong progress in the digital sphere.
so you were definitely launching a lot of pioneer stuff within the banks and the banking system. And with that, you decided to move on with Move It. So tell me
Correct.
about, what was the pioneering? I believe it was a pioneering force in digital banking. So talk to me a little bit about that. What was it about? And looking back, what lessons did you learn from launching and scaling Move It?
Yeah, one of the problems with moving, it was just a little bit too early. It was a few years too early. It was a little bit too advanced, Investors and the market weren't quite ready. I mean, we
Hmm.
had features that you see in the likes of Revolut and Nubank and, these other platforms today. We had that back in, we launched a beta at the end of 2012, and as you mentioned, we were the first mobile digital bank. There were other online digital banks, but we were the first app where you could access a debit card from within the app without
Hmm.
requiring either to send physical paperwork with a wet signature or needed to go online to register.
Hmm.
And so that was a big deal, especially in the States, which it was very conservative in respect to this. So,
Yeah.
we were very upfront with the regulators and so forth, engage them extensively. And we basically convinced them to let us do a small scale test to see if it would work to limit the risk because
Hmm.
they didn't believe that we could do digital identity verification as safely as someone walking into a branch with their driver's license. And we said, well, listen, the reality is, within a few years, you are going to have to learn how to do this because that is the trend. And they, to their credit, the CFPB and the Fed were aware enough that they realized that that was the case, even though they didn't necessarily like it. So
Hmm.
we gave them a safe option to test, and so as a result, we were able to sort of set some very strong design patterns for the industry to come.
Hmm. So this is a very interesting part because you spoke about digital banking in United States. Even today, if you look at the whole neo-digital banking space, the Monzos, the Revoluts of the world are actually from United Kingdom. There is Chime in US, but even then, a lot of these neo-digital banking startups in US have not really taken off. One of the reasons is obviously the regulatory landscape, but I think but do you think are there any other reasons, like in terms of the consumer mindset, as to why new digital banking in United States is not taking off?
No, it's primarily a combative regulatory environment. So, if you look at the G20,
Uh-huh.
or you look at the developed nations, the 43 developed nations, there's only one developed nation that doesn't have a fintech charter, and it's the United States. There's only one of the G20 that doesn't have a fintech charter, and it's the
Oh,
United
wow.
States. And the reason for that is that a fintech bank, a purely digital banking license, in the minds of the incumbents, would be an unlevel playing field. And that's because of some legacy legislation that exists in the United States called the Community Reinvestment Act, which was introduced in 1977, which requires every bank servicing a specific community in say, a city or town in rural United States, if that bank is the last bank branch in the town, they're prohibited from closing that branch to offer the vital service of financial access and financial inclusion. That was the law in 1977. It made sense in 1977. It really doesn't make sense for financial inclusion today. But these banks feel, well, why should we have to carry the cost of these branches because of this legislation if a digital bank can come in and operate without that requirement and that cost? And so there's an argument that it's not a level playing field. The solution is not to stop fintech banks from coming, is what the regulatory posture of the US is today, but the solution is to reform the Community Reinvestment Act law to focus on better methods of financial inclusion. But in the current partisan environment in the United States, that reform can't happen. And so therefore, the FinTech Charter has been a victim of that sort of political landscape, which means that the lobbying groups have been hard at work to really stop fintechs from taking root there. You see the success they've had in every market, around the world. The largest bank outside of Asia today is a fintech, Nubank. Of course, the largest financial institution in the world is a fintech, Ant Group out of China. The largest private digital bank in the world is also out of, actually it's publicly listed now, WeBank, out of China. And then you've got Revolut is a 10-year-old bank and it has more customers than HSBC globally. So, all of the fastest growing banks in the world are digital players now. And the US has left itself out of contention for that, largely because of their regulatory structure.
Yeah, this is very, very eye-opening. I think this is going to be one of the trends that US is going to miss out on if they quickly don't work on changing the regulatory landscape. Because I used to live and work in Africa, and M-Pesa, mobile money, was something I was first introduced to in Africa. And the digital banking or the mobile banking penetration in Africa is actually the largest in the world, and that is a technology that the world is kind of catching up to now. So I think US is a very solid place where a lot of innovation can happen. But like you rightly said, in this space, they will miss out the bus because of the regulatory and compliance rigid structure that they have here currently. So that brings me to my next question. I have heard you often say that banking is no longer somewhere you go, but something you do. How do you see the future of banking evolving with AI and decentralization? Now, I think AI and decentralization are two buzzwords that I've thrown in. So before you answer that question, can you help our audience understand the aspects of AI and what is the meaning of decentralization in banking?
Okay, so let's go back to the basics, I guess. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we're talking about machine intelligence that simulates or approximates human intelligence in some manner. But we've been trying to do this for 80 years, essentially. You could argue that Alan Turing, who developed the probably most well-known test for artificial intelligence, the Turing test, worked on decoding computing algorithms for German, war charts and communications through the Enigma device, which was an encoded or encryption machine. And he created this, one of the world's first computers called the Bomber out of Bletchley Park. And he personified it, saying it was, his friend, a machine intelligence, and that sort of took us down that. Then in 1956, you have Rosenblatt working on perceptrons, which were sort of artificial neurons. Back in those days were in silicon, but today we do that in code, and this is the weighting systems we use for training models today, based on perceptrons as a coded circuit. Then you have expert systems in the 80s, leading to, for example, IBM Deep Blue beating Gary Kasparov in 96, I think it was. Then we go to 2015. We have a leap to deep learning in 1996 with Hinton and Lacan. And, that leads us to deep learning and, AlphaGo beating Lee Sedol in 2015, and to what we have today with, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and these other technologies. What we're talking about today is getting closer and closer to that goal of artificial general intelligence, which has primarily been the goal of AI practitioners for, as I say, a better part of a century. But there's a lot of disagreement over what would represent artificial general intelligence, an AI that is cognitively as capable as a human, that you couldn't tell the difference when you're talking to it. You wouldn't know it's not a human in that scenario. We're arguing about what should be the test to define cognition. In the meantime, we're at the point now with AI where pretty much every human cognition test, whether it's math, science, physics, the spoken, written word, that an AI is now able to outperform most humans. And so I don't know whether the moniker or milestone of AGI is even important anymore. Certainly, we are seeing machine intelligence catch human intelligence very rapidly and do so much more cognitively efficiently, less neuronal steps to get to the same reasoning output, as an example. And then where that takes us is obviously super intelligent AI, ASI, right? That's next. But as Eric Schmidt said recently on Squawk Box, the arrival of non-human intelligence is a really big deal for the species.
So
that's AI in a quick summary.
Yeah, so that's AI. We actually covered a lot of things. So there's AI, which is large scale automation of our mundane task. Then there is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is kind of taking a step up in terms of how we can go about doing basic human tasks through the machine. And there is ASI, which is artificial super intelligence, which is actually mimicking a lot of behavior that humans do. So these are like the three stages. What stage are we at? I think the lines between AI and AGI are getting very blurry.
So I mean, if we're not at AGI already, then the argument over that is sort of, I guess, becoming less meaningful. That boundary between AI and AGI is becoming less clear. But if we haven't passed it already, we are going to hear claims of AGI fairly consistently from this point forward. So that's AI. But of course, there's different types of AI applications as well. There's industrial artificial intelligence, which would be used in supply chain automation, large scale resource management and efficiency for city operations, for example. You see it in use in facial recognition for customs and border patrol. This is AI. Then you have generative AI, which is using AI for more creative elements and mimicking human behavior. So artwork, writing, building movies like Sora and things like that now from prompts. That's just, again, taking a human task that we would do and generating these things through AI. And then you have agentic AI, which people are going to hear a lot more about this year, which is where we're using an AI to act as our personal agent that will do tasks on our behalf. So there's different flavors of AI as well. But you can combine all of that. If you could combine all of that competency into a single AI intelligence, then you'd obviously have something that's very powerful and very clever. So now we're developing multimodal AI, which has different types of AI sort of stitched together.
So we spoke a lot about AI. Let's talk about AI through the lens of banking first before we move forward. So we spoke about agentic AI. By the way, I'm very interested in that stream because I know a lot of startups were actually building agentic AI to take care of, the customer care and customer onboarding and things like that. But that aside, I want to hear from you. What are the What are the basic trends in banking? Where do you see disruption because of AI, AGI, and ASI? So we will take, you're a futurist. We'll talk about it like not from the landscape of 2 to 5 years, but literally like 10, 15, 20 years down the line.
Oh, well, I would say in 10 years' time, all of the fastest growing banks in the world will be AI
Oh.
businesses.
Hmm.
I would say by 2050, what we think of as a bank in 2050 will bear absolutely zero, correlation with what we would have thought of as a bank in the 1980s. It will be so different that you wouldn't recognize it as a bank if you were around. The products that we have today won't exist. Banking will be like electricity plugged into the utility of the world, but operated largely autonomously. And banks will go from, if you say JP Morgan Chase, from something like 160 or 180,000 employees, maybe down to a few thousand, because there's not a single function in banking that will not be affected by artificial intelligence. But that is also true of many other industries. Healthcare is going to be completely transformed by artificial intelligence. Manufacturing and transportation, there's hardly a sector that won't be touched by AI, but banking and finance is one of the sectors that lends itself very clearly to high levels of automation, and we're already using it in many areas. But the bank itself, as a whole, is going to become a set of algorithms, most likely.
I want to take a breather. You said from 160, 180,000 employees, JP Morgan Chase will reduce to a couple of thousand employees. That's a huge job loss. That's like a moment to like
Yeah.
let it sink in. That's huge. And in a
Well, I didn't
period
say
of 10 years.
2,000, but I said a few thousand, so we're close. But yeah, I mean, it could be 8,000, maybe, right? I don't know, but I mean, the fact is, if you look at all of the fastest growing banks in the world today, they're all technology companies. Why? Well, first of all, they have the scaling laws applied. Hyperscaling is what we talk about with AI, but the reason it is so successful, Nubank and so forth, is they've been able to grow very, very quickly, and they've grown bigger than the typical banks in terms of number of customers and engagement. What
Yeah.
they haven't done as yet is captured the asset base of the traditional banks, but I don't think that is as important a measure now. I think asset size is not going to help you become AI relevant, so I don't think that's necessarily important. But the point is, if you look at the trajectory, technology is how we're doing banking today. Most people, 95% of their banking is done through a mobile phone. And when AI comes into the mix, the same thing's going to happen within the next 10 years is 95% of your banking will be handled by your personal AI agent. That seems the trajectory. So you won't need a plastic card to make a payment. Look at UPI rails in India, already today in terms of the success there. All you need is a phone. And in the future, your AI will be able to use those same rails to make transactions on your behalf just when you tell it to.
I
So
think all of this is
yeah.
this is all unnerving that AI takes over your life so much so that it is making decisions on your behalf on where to invest, how to go about spending. That's a lot to take in. Do you think the world today, the individuals today are ready for
We
this?
haven't even started, Anu. We haven't even started on the disruption. Like we start talking, like imagine that being applied in healthcare. Imagine that suddenly you have all of these amazing tools. We can eliminate cancer. We've got gene therapy. We can hack your genes, and we can promise real longevity. But you have to sort of completely change the way you think about providing healthcare. It becomes a data-driven endeavor. I mean, this is what I think what most people don't understand about AI is the extent of change that it's going to bring on the system. It's just incredible.
It is scary. I think it is extremely, extremely scary. If I understand this correctly, this is not just going to change how we make decisions about ourselves, about our lives, and everything moving forward, but this is also one of the most important things which relates to our employment. It seems like if JP Morgan Chase is going to reduce the workforce from 160,000 or 180,000 today to a couple of thousands in like 10, 15 years down the line, what happens to our employment? What happens to individuals without jobs? What is the future of employment from that perspective? Do we have jobs in the future?
Well, I could say you need to read my book, The Rise of Technosocialism, where I have an entire chapter on this, but instead I'll give you the short answer.
Sure.
The answer is, twofold, right? Firstly, that the AI is going to sort of impact every industry, and it's going to impact white collar and blue collar workers simultaneously. So it's not limited to just factory workers. Lawyers, accountants, bankers, are just doctors are equally going to be disrupted by this tech.
Yeah.
Now, there's a good reason why doctors are going to stay human facing for quite some time. But over time, as we learn that AIs are the best diagnosticians when it comes to treating disease and conditions, then we will go to the doctor and we'll say, this is what the AI said. And the doctor will go, that looks right. Yes, I agree with that. Proceed. Yeah. Yeah. And doctors will be using the tech as well because it'll just make them better doctors and they'll provide better care. So, that's a illustration, but it's going to affect every job simultaneously. So the capitalists would say, yes, but every time we've had this type of disruption or technology disruption of employment, we've always created new jobs to fill the gap.
Yes.
But entrepreneurs are not saying that today. Entrepreneurs are saying, no, everyone's going to have to get universal basic income. And we're looking at a period of time when we'll have solopreneurs that can create their own decacorn, a $10 billion unicorn, and start up with no employees. Entrepreneurs and the tech bros are telling us they want humanless corporations, right? Uber's been saying it for many years that they want driverless cars because that's the way to make Uber. So the industry's been very, very clear that the intent of AI is to remove human labor from the workforce. But that doesn't mean we don't work. Because it just means that the role of work in society changes. If we're taxing algorithms and robots and, producing massive capital, as a result of extreme efficiency gains with AI, then that wealth can be distributed in the form of a universal basic income or similar to make sure that people survive that disruption. But then we get to do whatever we want to do. We can do things with real meaning and purpose. And and up to 40% of the developed world's workforce will probably be employed in climate mitigation in, beyond the 2050s. So there's a lot of work to do. It's just that work won't be the way you earn money to survive, because the basic services of society will be provided by artificial intelligence at very low cost, very efficiently. So a sign of a developed economy will be that people can live quite comfortably without having to work. But that doesn't mean people won't work. There'll still be lots of things to do, but it's just not going to have an economic component in the way it does today, most likely. That's 30 years out, right? So in between that and now, we have a transition to make. And some economies are going to resist that. They're going to try and ban artificial intelligence from taking human jobs. There's going to be lots of different models happening at the same time that we will sort of see experimentation. We'll see some resistance and so forth. Recently in the US, there was a dock workers strike. I don't know if you recall that. It was Biden was still president at the time. There was a big dock workers strike, and that strike was over using artificial intelligence in US ports, because China is already 80% automated in their shipping ports, and the US was demanding for 20 years that US dock workers could not be replaced by artificial intelligence. So we are going to see a sort of fragmented approach to this type of unemployment. But ultimately, the most advanced, the biggest and most efficient economies in the world in the future will be highly autonomous economies, which will be focused on automation wherever possible.
So people who get out of job or who So there are a couple of things. Universal basic pay, universal basic income, what many of audience might not know, is basically like a fixed amount that you get every month from the government to like basically just have a very sustainable, good, basic quality of life. Pretty much a very socialist approach, which actually happens in Europe and Canada right now, where you still get a lot of benefits for just surviving and having a good life on an average, a good life. And that is what universal basic income is. Basically, all governments should really give a basic amount to individuals for them to take care of their daily needs. That today is a very socialist approach, right? And that's why it's a big worry in capitalist nation, because that is not what the norm is, not the tradition is, not the policy infra is
Sure.
about. So that is the part where citizens or humans are getting very scared. They're like, my government is not going to come and support me for this. What happens to me? And I think that is also part of the reason, slightly off tangent, but that's also part of the reason we see rise in right-wing rhetoric. You want to go back to basic.
Yes, absolutely. Economic uncertainty and fear of
Yeah.
the rate of change and so forth. But here's the problem.
Mm.
If you want to keep capitalism, you can't have AI. You can't have both. Right? AI is not compatible with capitalism because when it gets to a certain point of maximum efficiency, then the most efficient system doesn't have human money in the system. Right?
Exactly.
Money is itself an inefficient form of value exchange at scale when you hyperscale. So AI, the more you want AI, yes, there's a potential to make incredible short-term economic gains with artificial intelligence, but the longer you implement AI, the less valuable money is in the system, because the more and more you automate it, the less machines will need money. They'll need energy, but energy will be very cheap, but they just won't need money. They'll need energy and resources. And that's the key problem to think about, in the 2040s and 2050s, because we can scale up almost infinitely because of artificial intelligence. If we do that, if we use tech to scale up infinitely, then we'll be extinct. Right? We'll use all the resources that are on the planet. So, and so this means that we need a new system of value, which is not about generating return and money. We need a sustainable existence. Otherwise, we're going to extinct ourselves. So as soon as you go down the path of artificial intelligence, and at the same time that we have climate change, it requires you to have a much more mature political and economic outlook than, the way we think about politics and economics today. And, there's a simpler way of sort of explaining this that I normally use is because, you get a lot of resistance to this message that we're in the sort of late stage capitalism and capitalism is likely going to fail because of AI.
Yes.
Particularly in the US, they're religious about capitalism, right? I normally do a thought exercise, which I ask people if they think capitalism will still be the best system we've had in 10,000 years. And the reality is that it's not. So therefore, why don't we change it now? But the fact is that AI and climate and these other things that are happening will force us to change it. And we've known that for some time. We've known that at least since the 1970s, that capitalism would sort of run out of steam. And certainly when it comes to climate and, the eco-refugee problem, for example, by 2050, it's estimated there's going to be 1.2, maybe 1.6 billion eco-refugees on the planet. People displaced by climate and hunger, according to food scarcity and things like that. And capitalism doesn't have the tools to fix that. It just doesn't, right? So we are going to have to get to the point at some point where we decide we just have to get on with the job, and that how much it's going to cost is no longer a reasonable or ethical measure of action, right?
Mm. But so, some of these concepts that you speak are very dystopian. It scares me. It's like as if the future is doomed, which is marred with a lot of
only if we have capitalism.
only if you have capitalism. But even in countries like Europe, because they're socialists currently, they're
here's the thing: is what we think of as socialist today is not what we're building either, right? So it's not neo-socialism or neo-communism. Some people describe Star Trek as a techno-communist utopia, right? But the reality is, it's just going to be massively more efficient to have large organized systems where we use artificial intelligence to improve the quality of life, right? We're going to make people live longer. We're going to give them better health care. We are going to be able to automate systems that make people comfortable, building housing very efficiently, autonomous transportation. This is the promise of AI, extremely efficient societies. So I'll give you one illustration. There's a lot of debate about RFK Jr. coming in and being the head of the FDA and so forth in the US right now.
Yes.
Because there's a recognition that the US healthcare system is inefficient and, it makes mistakes and so forth. You apply AI to that and you get a system that could be 70% more efficient through the use of various technologies that would radically change the cost of national health care in the United States. But it requires dismantling the current system. So overall, it's going to cost us as a society and as taxpayers much, much less money to get a much, much, much better result than we get today in the free market. And so there would be no logical reason not to pursue that if the outcome is healthier societies, more freedom for individuals, longevity, better quality of life, all of those benefits that we would get. It's not about choosing socialism over capitalism. It's about using technology to make the life of your citizens in a highly autonomous economy as best as possible, for as efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
And the capitalist system doesn't have the capability to do that.
I agree with you.
Although the tech does, right? So that the capitalist system is generating the tech right now. So that's going to give us that edge. And we're going to be very grateful for that. But ultimately, I think, Dave Shapiro, who's a futurist, spends his time in the US mostly, but, I think UK based originally. He talks about the meaning economy, that there'll only sort of be 4 jobs left.
Yes.
In the world. There'll be statutory roles, looking after society, policing it, ethics, those sort of things. There'll be human care. So it'll be, for people who have been really, affected by, losing their precious capitalism and things like that, or, losing their jobs, and trying to find purpose, or the level of disruption and change that's occurring is jarring to them. That'll require a lot of care. And then there'll be the human experience side. So being able to use our time to travel and learn and things like this. And then, probably the last category is, human adaptation, which will be climate mitigation. It'll be, dealing with genetics and longevity and, changes in the way we think about schooling systems with AI and things like that.
So there is hope. There's some hope for us moving forward.
There's a lot of hope. I mean, once we get to the other side, it's going to be much better. But it's the chaos in between, I guess.
Chaos in between, yeah. So you spoke about a very interesting part of it was ethics around AI, right? Ethics and responsibility in AI. I think that is, as AI really catches up, this could be like one of the most hotly debated topic. When a system is making a decision on my behalf, and I have given all this responsibility for a system to make this whole decision, how do we ensure accountability when something goes wrong? What is the role of having a compliance in place or a compliance structure in place for having ethical AI moving forward?
I mean, an AI acting as you is actually a much simpler problem than the ethics problem. So an AI accurately, independently doing what you need it to do and doing that better than you could do it is certainly within the realm of possibility, and we're not far off that. right? So it'll be a better job of doing what you want to do than you can do, most likely, right? So I don't think that's necessarily going to be the issue. For example, an autonomous vehicle that's driving a car will be better than any human driver has ever been, right? And that will reduce road deaths. So, with apologies to taxi drivers coming from Kerala to Dubai, like this is just a safer form of technology to get us from A to B. Just as going to motor vehicles from horse and cart was safer and better for society, right? So there's that element of it. But I think what was the other part of the question you asked?
The other part was more centered around the ethical.
Oh, the ethics. Yes.
Ethics of it.
That's a bigger problem because we can't even decide on ethics collectively today. So how are we going to teach AI what is good ethics? But we sorely need that. We need to have some sort of ethical framework for AIs so they know what is right and wrong. But and there's some stuff that's easy, right? Like you shouldn't kill people, although, it's most likely that one of the first applications of autonomous robots will be in warfare, unfortunately, right? Which shouldn't be, but, but what about if we have autonomous healthcare? If we have AI algorithms managing healthcare, then how do we deal with treating gender dysmorphia and kids that want to be transgender and things like that? At the moment, there's no way we could get ethical agreement on that to teach an AI. So that's the constraint, is not that AIs might do things wrong. It's that humans are really bad at defining right and wrong in a way that a machine could have sort of clear ethics. But something we're going to have to definitely get better at, for sure.
You think that the ethics of the AI will depend or change from country to country, region to region, as we have today, for example, with the gun laws, and about the capital punishment for rape or murders and things like that, which is very subjective and it is defined by the culture of the society. Do you see that the same for ethics for AI? That would be very society, like capitalist countries will have a different approach as opposed to socialist?
Well, we see that even between differences between DeepSeek R1 and OpenAI O3 and things like that. We do see cultural differences there, not just in the language that's used, but in the reasoning and decision making. Actually, frankly, DeepSeek is the reason DeepSeek created a massive sell-off in Wall Street tech stocks is because it showed that sort of the approach of training that was very capitalist driven about trying to force outcomes that were commercially motivated was far less efficient than just teaching AI to reason and think the way DeepSeek has, And there's still arguably parts of DeepSeek that were taken from OpenAI and things like that. But at the same time, if OpenAI could do this, they would have, but they chose not to because they're trying to deliver an AI that gives them commercial benefits, right? So it's already turned out that AI that's geared towards hyperscaling for commercial benefits is not as efficient as AI that's just trying to do the job of thinking better and faster. Again, this is what I mean, is that if we try and reinforce the existing value systems, we're coming up against this sort of sticky wall of resistance right now in many areas. The climate is resisting, intelligence is resisting. It's just, philosophically, it's a change. And I think people have to get this out of their head that, that it's capitalism versus socialism and so forth. What we are trying to do is just create a net new system, right? And that's much more better for humans, right? And so you have to forget the old names. You could call it, the two systems that are sort of competing now, I would call neo-feudalism, which is the US system, which is endeavoring to capture as many assets as possible for the smallest group of people as possible to benefit, versus what I would call a more techno-socialist approach, which is using technology to improve the lives or quality of lives of people on a broad basis.
Yeah.
So they're the two competing systems right now, although it's not necessarily techno-socialism in pure political form. It's more about techno-optimization, right? Is you're really looking at society and saying, how do we apply this technology to make technology its optimal, most efficient form?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if I ask you what's the purpose of the economy where you live, I think the number one purpose of the economy should not be market growth or GDP growth. I think it's generally accepted now that we are going to have to shift to a posture where we measure the economy, the success of an economy on its ability to create a better existence for its citizens, and that's where climate comes in. And remember that the problems we have in the climate today also show that capitalism is not compatible with the environment, that the planet we live on, right?
Yeah.
If it was, we wouldn't have 8.2 billion people die in India each year from air pollution, right?
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's not that much. It's 8.2 million every year on a global basis. But, we have 1.6 million at least in India from air quality. So we wouldn't have that if it wasn't for capitalism, right? Because capitalism tells us that it's better to burn fossil fuels to make money and take the loss of human lives because we're making money. But in a techno-optimist society, then that would not be a reasonable trade-off.
Yeah, but this is what the thing is. We're talking about how society or government in general drives the fabric of society, like overall, right? We say like, oh, these are the capitalist and socialist policies, which actually defines the kind of life that individual has on ground. But with AI, seeping so deep in the system such that an individual will not have the job he or she could relate to, that is taking away the purpose from them, right? Are we moving towards a society which is purposeless? How will an individual find meaning in life, or meaning in general, with this whole AI disruption? Like for me, my identity.
Let's bring back chimney sweeps, because we lost those jobs of chimney sweeps, and we really want to bring and let's bring back coal mining. No. I mean, no. Look. I think the reality is, I think you'd get quite a lot of people that would agree that their job is purposeless. Right? But this is not about not having purpose, Anu. This is about having real purpose. Right? Because what you can do for a job in the future with the tools that we're bringing mean you can accomplish a lot more for society, a lot more for yourself than you can do in the current economic system. So this is why Shapiro calls it the meaning economy. He said that humans are living half a life today because we have to work to survive. Once you don't have to worry about working to survive, you can do really meaningful and purposeful things, like repair the planet, like live a longer life, like, find solutions to some of the most intractable problems, eliminate poverty, eliminate cancer, eliminate homelessness. We can start building rocket ships to build colonies on the moon and Mars. I mean, we can find immense purpose without the economic constraints that we have currently. And the technology should allow that, theoretically.
Yeah. So you talk about the augmented age. What are the key skills that people should develop to stay relevant in this new era of augmented age, the techno-socialism that you talk about and the future that you talk about? What are the skill sets that one should have to stay relevant?
Well, we've talked a lot about the rate of change. So a superpower is adaptability, right? And in this day and age, I encourage everyone to use AI in your life as much as you can. Because get used to that sort of collaborative approach with machine intelligence, because that's going to be a common process over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years as humans integrate artificial intelligence into society. That's going to be a powerful skill. So I say that there are two types of people in the world today. The first type is using AI to enhance their career, to build new businesses, to take themselves in new directions. And the second type of person is the person those that will be replaced by the first type. Yeah.
So basically move back to the first type of people and then have a happy life ahead. That's the message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, there will be, obviously, as I pointed out, there will be areas of focus, climate mitigation, the eco-refugee problem, things like that are very human problems that still need people really fixing that. And, maybe, one of the things I proposed in the book, Technosocialism, that people would have to do 2 years of community service to qualify for a lifetime UBI, like a military service program. But that program would be in climate mitigation, climate resilience, infrastructure resilience type thing, or, dealing with problems like food scarcity and the eco-refugee problem around the world. That would be the global sort of community service that would emerge. That's why we have to be a lot more consensus-based in the future as well. There's going to be a lot of cross-border negotiation. So the sort of stuff that we see happening with Trump and the isolationism and, strong nationalism here, that's sort of the last gasp of that system trying to assert itself, when that clearly has to change in the future.
Yeah, that's makes sense.
That's my impression, yeah.
So we spoke a lot about the future. My last question to you is, what excites you most about the future of the techno-socialism that you spoke of? And what should one do? Like, we obviously spoke about adaptability, but what should one do in the short run of 10 to 20 years, not just as an individual, but, towards the effort, as an individual, the effort towards the society? What should one do in next 10 to 20 years to prepare for that? So it's a two-part thing. What excites you the most about the future that you said? And how can an individual today prepare himself, herself, and the society at large for that future?
I mean, with quantum computing and AI both coming together, there's really, we're reaching a point of accelerated intelligence or accelerated learning or applied intelligence, where we'll be able to solve some of the most tricky problems that we've thought of, understand the universe and physics and, dark matter and, all of these sorts of things, maybe find other proof of life, like just amazing things. We're getting the tech with James Webb Space Telescope and other stuff now, and, the Europa Clipper mission and maybe, Elon putting boots on Mars sometime soon. These are really exciting things to observe. So the thing that makes me quite positive about this is that, the sky is the limit, that AI is going to make, these sort of things more and more possible. And a core element of that is longevity. So I ask people, what would you do with an extra 50 years? 50 years of good health, not 50 years of elderly health, 50 years of good, strong, robust health. What if you could have 4 careers, what would they be? And so if you start to think like that, it's pretty exciting. But in the short term, I would say our focus through this phase should be about fixing the problems in the current system as inclusive as possible, right? Is how do we create changes that are going to benefit more and more of us over time? And that's the power of these technologies, but it does require different thinking. Because the problem with the current system is we all compete against each other. We compete for resources, we compete for salary, we compete for the best clothes or the best watch or whatever the case. So we're in this competition, but it turns out that actually that competition amongst tribes and humans is a fairly inefficient organizing principle. That consensus-based approaches are actually much better at producing innovation faster. So you have, if you go back ancient examples like building ancient cathedrals or the Great Wall of China. More modern examples might be the Apollo project that got humans to the moon, or the Human Genome Project, things like
Mm.
this, where large bodies of people working together are extremely efficient. Even, mobilization during the Second World War, and how rapidly technological progress was made there is evidence of consensus based. So consensus with AI is sort of going to be a superpower in terms of the species, but it does require us moving to sort of that different posture. But if I was to say to people to mentally prepare for this, just get comfortable with the rate of change, that from this point forward, it's all going to be different. And if you are comfortable with that, then be curious about what is possible and look for problems in the world that you think we could solve with these new technologies as they emerge, because chances are we will be able to fix them, quite soon.
This is
That's the positive.
amazing. This is amazing. I think my key takeaway from this entire conversation is the change is happening. It is going to continue to happen, possibly at a faster rate. I think the best part is to be more excited about it. To be when you cannot beat them, join them. So join the bandwagon, be a part of it. But I am walking out of this conversation smiling ear to ear because I think I have learned a lot about AI, automation, banking. But even more importantly, I'm walking out of it with a hope of some kind for the human race in general. What I
I'm
think
glad.
we will
I'm
think
glad.
about things very differently. Today, like you said, we're talking about money and we're talking about basics. And then suddenly, I think humanity will come at forefront after the chaos of capitalism and AI will settle. We will really understand what true meaning of humanity is. And I think that's a great time to be there.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brett. I had a great conversation with you, and I hope you have enjoyed talking about it as much as I did listening to this.
Absolutely. I think this is my role now, to give people meaning and show them
Yes, definitely.
that there is a path through this chaos. It is going to be a little bit chaotic for a while, but we come out of the other side much better off.
I,
So
I
be but positive and upbeat.
Yeah, thank you so much.